welcome to the first show. This is going to be an exploration of South Africa's amazing and vibrant liquor and spirits industry. We have one of the best wine industries in the world, we have one of the best spirits and liquor industries in the world, and we have a very vibrant economy that evolves around it. And we'd like to take a look at the incredible industry as a whole, the products it makes, and we would like to promote safe and responsible drinking. So welcome to the very first tasting. This is my friend Ben, and we're going to have a look at South Africa's premium products and some of the best things that have ever come out of the South African liquor industry. So let's take a look at our first start over here. I'm really proud to introduce these four products. I'm sure a lot of you will know these two on the outside over here. These products are from 3 Ships and Bains, and the reason that I'm proud of these particular products, it's really quite exciting to be able to say as a South African that we've got products that can really compete on the global stage, really go up against the best in the world. So let's take a look at the first one, Ben. This is from 3 Ships, and this is one of the most commonly found bottles on South African shelves, and the reason that I love it is because it is unbelievably good value for money. You just get a hell of a lot of whiskey for your rand.
So I'm glad that you mentioned the rand right up front, because I think often what happens is we walk into a bottle store and you sort of want to impress someone, so you go for a bottle that's 700, 800, 900 rand, thinking that it's a solid bottle of whiskey. But I mean, I think this one's what retails about 240 odd rand. Does the rand value speak to the quality of what's in the bottle?
I would say that the whiskey industry as a whole and the spirits industry as a whole can be a very misleading industry, and that the money that you pay for a bottle usually doesn't represent the flavor, value, and overall just presence of the bottle. And one of the best examples that I would like to give is maybe Johnnie Walker Blue, where people really like Johnnie Walker Blue. It's a fantastic looking bottle. It looks great on the table. If you give it to someone as a gift, they know you've spent a lot of money. But the truth is that you're very unlikely to find a whiskey connoisseur or aficionado going after a bottle like that.
Yes.
You just don't get very much flavor. You don't get very much depth. It's not a very rich overall pour for its money. There's simply a lot better whiskies out there for the rand. And at 240, 250 rand, you've got to remember this is locally made, so we're not paying shipping fees where you've got to move heavy glass bottles across the ocean. They've got to wait at Durban port for 6 months while they have port problems. So this is a really good value for money bottle. I mean, you would find this on a foreign shelf at twice the price. If you went to a shop in London, this would be a 500 rand bottle there. So this is something really special, and what they do here is they make the whiskey and then they age it in American bought bourbon barrels to increase the complexity of the flavor.
I see. Okay, so I was going to come to that, because I see if we look at the 2 3 Ships bottles here, one has got, I think there's a sort of a timeline on it, and then the other one says bourbon. So what is the main difference between a bourbon cask versus the regular 3 Ships that we pick up?
Well, a bourbon cask whiskey, what they do is in the final stages, so the whiskeys are actually more or less the same. They use the same mash bill. That means they use the same base alcohol made out of more or less the same grain mixes. Mm-hmm. And what these guys do for an extra couple of months, maybe a year, I'm not sure exactly how long, they will stick this into American bought bourbon barrels. So to make bourbon in America, one of the rules is 2 rules. It has to be 51% corn at a minimum to be called an American bourbon, and you have to use a virgin oak barrel. So your leading Scottish whiskies, Japanese whiskies, South African whiskies, obviously like this one, you'll often find are aged in American bourbon barrels, second-hand bourbon barrels, where they will take on an element of the flavor from that American bourbon, adding to the complexity of the whiskey, where you have the base flavor and then another layer of added complexity that is given by the bourbon barrel itself. You mentioned the age, and what they talk about is age statement. I would sometimes ignore the age of the bottle of whiskey because it can be very misleading.
100%. I think a lot of people go into the store and think, right, if I go for a 10, 12, 15-year-old whiskey, then the higher the age, the better the whiskey, and I guess the more you pay.
Yes, look, the more you pay, 100%. Whether or not it's better whiskey is always up for debate. Some of the best whiskies in the world, the ones that connoisseurs literally fight tooth and nail over to buy at auction prices, come with no age statement at all. So for the less, let's say the less experienced consumer, it's something that's very important in the front of their mind. They want a big age number on the front of the bottle. It kind of gives a little bit of status. But what you have to remember, when your temperature range is more different, like in South Africa and in the States, certain parts of the States where they make a lot of bourbons and Tennessee whiskies and that sort of thing, they get a lot more flavor into the bottle a lot quicker. Especially with certain markets, it's something that I would largely ignore. So it is an important element, but it's not everything.
Okay, all right. No, not a problem. Well, should we start with
yeah, let's take a look at
this bourbon cask?
It's got a nice light nose to it, not overpowering.
So when smelling this, what are we looking for here?
For me, sometimes what I do is I warm up to the whiskey with a smell. So if I start out and I just have a big sip, it's sometimes a little bit overwhelming for me. I get a little bit too much alcohol and a little bit too much flavor. Okay. So what I do is I build up to it by giving it a good smell. It kind of lets your taste buds know what's about to happen.
Okay.
So I just run it around the glass a little bit. I mean, there's no need to get too fancy. I mean, sometimes I go to some of these whiskey tastings and the guys that take themselves so seriously with their funny little techniques and whatever it is. For me, I just give it a smell. I kind of try to pick out some of the flavors right from the smell. So like with this one, I get a little bit of vanilla. I get a tiny little bit of burnt oranges. That will be from the barrel, from the bourbon barrel. Those are bourbon flavors coming through. And then, yeah, I just give it a nice light hit. This has got quite a nice light mouthfeel to it. And it's a little bit peppery. It's a little bit of a younger whiskey that's coming through there.
Okay. Yeah, there's almost like a tang to it, if you will. I don't know if that's the orange that you were speaking about before. But not as harsh as what I thought it would be. I thought given that it would be bourbon, it would give me a bit of a stronger sort of knockback, but that's fairly easy to drink.
Yeah, look, the bourbon barrel definitely takes the edge off a little bit. So if you compare this to the 5-year-old Three Ships whiskey, which by the way, as a weekend drink, I mean, it's under 200 rand bottle. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's really, really good, easy drinking. But compared to the 5-year-old, and especially their base bottle from these particular guys, this definitely takes the edge off a little bit with the extra aging in the bourbon barrel, and there's no doubt about the extra kind of layer of flavor that comes through. A fantastic bottle for its money. I would highly recommend Three Ships 5-year-old bourbon cask. I picked this one up for under 240 rand at Norman Goodfellows in Ilovo. They do fantastic pricing and they've got a great selection. So if you're looking for an easy weekend pour, I would recommend this to absolutely anybody. And if you have an uncle who comes to the table, mixes it with a bit of Coke at 240 rand a bottle, you're not going to flinch. This over here is one of my favorites. I have been drinking this. I started drinking this, buying it by the case when I was around 20. It's quite a long time ago with my friend Garth. Believe it or not, Three Ships did their first malt whiskey bottle in the 1980s. So people don't really know about this. I've had people come to me and go, Aidan, I'm looking for a good South African whiskey. I don't want to just drink the base stuff anymore. This, again, it's a big step up from this over here. Okay. And it's still under 400 rand a bottle. So again, well underestimated. People want to go for the Irish stuff, the Scottish stuff, now also the Japanese stuff. That stuff is fantastic. It's way, way, way expensive. And for me, I'm just so proud of this bottle because it's a South African single malt, which means that it is made from malted barley. And that is one of your global premium standards for whiskey. So for me, I would always rather have a single malt whiskey over a blend.
Okay.
Now, don't get me wrong, you get some blends that are going to be better than some single malts, but this is absolutely fantastic. They'll malt the barley very slightly, and it then goes into the mash bill, and they will make a clear spirit. It will come out looking a little bit like vodka or a clear tequila, and it then goes into the barrel. This is barreled for 10 years. So remember, this is an age statement. Whiskey has been in the barrel for 10 years. And anytime I get a foreign guest that comes to South Africa, I make sure they leave with a bottle of this. If I really like them, I make sure they leave with a bottle like this, because this is fantastic drinking. So let's take a look at this now over here and compare to this. So you'll notice right off the bat, Ben, that the smell, that the nose is completely different.
Yeah, 100%.
It has a much milder, more complex nose, so it doesn't get that sort of big hit of alcohol that kind of comes to the nose with the blended younger whiskey here. I get kind of just a clearer, milder. You can really get the malted hops off there. Getting a little bit of fruit. I'm getting a little bit of apple.
And is that all those fruity flavors, are those based on the barrel that it's prepared in? Where do those different flavors come in the process?
That'll be from the mash bill, so that will be from the mix of grains, the mix of barley and grains that they use to make the initial mash bill. So when the clear liquid comes out of the distillery, before it goes into the barrel, it has its own flavor profile. It won't be very complex. You'll pick up flavors, maybe like popcorn if there's a little bit of grain in it. You'll pick up a little bit of grapey flavors if it's a grain whiskey like these are. With this, I just get a nice light complex. I get a little bit of barley on the nose. I get a little bit of wheat on the nose. I get a little bit of light apple and fruity floral notes. This is what is called a floral bouquet, or a more floral bouquet on a whiskey. So let's take a hit of that. Color slightly different to the bourbon barrel. It definitely doesn't have that big hit of alcohol that you get on the younger whiskey here. So I immediately noticed that it's got a little bit less of a slap, let's call it.
Sure.
This one slaps you in the back of the head just a little bit, and this one's absolutely just milder. It's deeper. It's a little bit easier on the palate. What do you think about this?
I quite enjoy it. There is a slight roughness to it, which then makes me wonder. Very often when we consume whiskies in South Africa, we'll throw a couple of cubes of ice in there. We might throw a splash of water. What is the right way, if such a thing exists, to consume either of these whiskies? Would you have it neat as we're tasting it now to maximize the flavors? Do you have it with a block of ice? What's the right way to do it?
There's a lot of controversy around this, and what happens is the whiskey snobs, the real whiskey snobs turn around and they say that it should always be drunk in a Glencairn glass like this. This is a specific whiskey tasting glass.
Sure.
Because the glass is also important, like a wine glass. This is shaped that you can get your nose in and you can get a bouquet of the smell. Your hand, it doesn't heat up the whiskey. So to begin with, people are already picky about the glass they choose. Then the real whiskey snobs, they don't like to mix anything with their whiskey at all. I don't think that this is correct for a number of reasons. First of all, it's all about enjoyment. This is all about lifestyle, and it's about enjoyment. It's about relaxing. It's about forgetting about the broken gate motor, the power's out again, Eskom double billed you, whatever it is. You've got to forget about that. You've got to relax. And how can you do it when someone's putting so many rules, of course, on just something that's supposed to be enjoyable? So for me, if the alcohol content in the bottle is very high, I've got some bottles on my shelf that are 60% alcohol by volume plus. Trust me, you do not want to drink those neat. I throw in a tiny chip of ice, depending on the weather. If it's very hot, I'll throw in a tiny chip of ice. What I might also do is put just a tiny drop of water in to break it up a little bit.
Okay.
And a lot of people do recommend doing that, where you put call it a pipette. It's just a tiny little plastic thing that allows you to applicate 1 drop or 2 drops into the glass.
Okay.
And they say that opens up the flavor and profile of the whiskey. And that's true. So I would recommend that to most people. I don't like the idea of taking a really good whiskey and just dumping it into a glass of ice. I recommend just the tiniest amount of water or ice if you're going to. But at the end of the day, if you like pouring your whiskey over a big glass of ice and that's enjoyable to you, then so
That's
be
what
it.
you've got to do, as long as you're doing it responsibly as well. We're going to keep it in mind.
I heard them interview once, on a side note, one of the most famous whiskey distillers in the world. I mean, the guy had been distilling whiskey for some of the biggest distilleries in the world for 50 years. And they asked him what he likes to do with his whiskey. And he looked them dead in the eye and he said, I like to mix 7-Up in my whiskey. I like to take a 2,000 rand bottle of whiskey and mix 7-Up, and that's how I enjoy it. And if it's good enough for him, it's not what I would do, but it's good enough for us.
Each to their own. Okay, yeah. Fantastic. Perfect. Okay, no, that's a lovely one.
No,
I quite enjoyed that.
It's an absolutely fantastic product, this, and it's been on the market for ages. So if you haven't ever tried this, please, next time you're going to buy a bottle of Jameson's, this stuff's like the same price. Do yourself a favor and try a single malt from South Africa.
Perfect. So now we're moving across to something that's slightly different. So you spoke a lot about the bourbon cask and where that comes from. Then we heard a little bit about a more aged whiskey and the sort of flavor profile and what that smells like. But now these two guys, what I picked up already is the word grain on here, which I understand is a little bit different to, I think, the malt. Correct. So what is the fundamental difference between a grain whiskey and a malted whiskey?
The mash bill, so the input ingredients that they use to make the initial base alcohol are very, very important. Bourbon whiskies in the US, by law, you actually have to use 51% corn in your mash bill. And what these guys do is they use only grain whiskies. So they don't malt any of their whiskies. If they do use barley, it's a very small amount. So when they talk about grains, it's things like rye, for example, or corn. Those are grain products, and those will be made into a base alcohol. And for the longest time, grain whiskies have actually been kind of undervalued by the global market. It was considered at the time to be a slightly cheaper way to produce whiskey, and that simply had to do with global economics and you know, the way the global agricultural system produces products and what was available at the time. I would largely ignore that because you can get an unbelievably good whiskey product from almost any grain bill, and that's why I like to promote the exploration of different products. Don't just stick to blended Scotch whiskey or single malt Scotch whiskey. Try something with a different mash bill, with different input ingredients. Try and pick out those flavors, explore the market a little bit. And for me, this is a great point of departure from somebody that's going from what they just normally drink, the run-of-the-mills, stuff like this, say a single malt or blended Scotch-style whiskey, into something different. So for me, bourbon's a great way to branch out, really nice. And then a grain whiskey like this, absolutely fantastic, especially for a South African palate. That's why South Africans like bourbon, because it's got corn in that, and there's something about corn that appeals to South Africans. We eat a lot of mealies, we eat a lot of maize.
Absolutely, yeah, it forms a big part of our diet, so it's a familiar taste and flavour. Okay.
There's something about it where our palate goes, I've seen this before, and we kind of tend to like it. I'm extremely proud of this particular product over here. Again, South African product, all South African product. And we'll get into tasting this now. It's got a slightly darker profile than maybe these two whiskies over here, if you have a look at the colour. And I think that has to do with the ex-brandy industry or cognac industry, so-called barrels that they use. You've got to remember, in South Africa we have a massive brandy producing industry, one of the biggest brandy producers in the world. So there's always second-hand brandy barrels in the South African market. So a company like this, instead of importing barrels from America, from bourbon production, they might save a little bit of money and use local barrels. And what it also does is it keeps our palates familiar with the overall flavor profile.
Okay.
So yeah, as you can see, it's a little bit darker. That's probably from the barrel. Let's take a look. Oh,
this is quite interesting for me compared to the first two bottles. There's almost a sweetness to it.
And where would that sweetness come from? Brandy. Now with this one, I definitely pick up that this had a much more vanilla, wheat, kind of barley profile.
Yeah.
This one, way fruitier.
100%.
It's more floral, so it smells a little bit like a nice summer garden, maybe a little bit of freshly cut flowers, and you definitely get that hit of grapiness in there. It almost smells like an old bottle of brandy.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, that's a lovely one. That's it's interesting to explore the range of grain versus malt and the origins. I mean, I found that quite interesting where you speak about the origins where it comes from the different casks.
Yeah.
So yeah, can definitely taste the difference between those two. And then what you've got here, the last one, which looks a little premium, if you will, with the silver tag on the front, and I see it's also got the Whiskey Brothers tag on the bottom.
Yeah, look,
so I think you're going to have to take us through what that means, sort of top to bottom, before we get into the actual contents of the bottle.
yeah, look, I'm quite excited about this over here, because remember, what I wanted to do is I kind of wanted to ask a question that I get asked often. Aidan, I'm looking for a nice South African whiskey, something just a little bit better. So what I did is I introduced these two. They're your kind of everyday drinkers, widely available, very good value for money. And this is just to kind of show off, to kind of flex a little bit on how good the South African industry actually is.
Okay.
So there is a shop I started going to. The first one I think was in Hyde Park Shopping Centre. It's been open for a number of years. It's won South African Small Business of the Year a couple of times. Do yourselves a favour, if you like spirits and good alcohol, go visit Whiskey Brothers. There's a couple of them dotted around Johannesburg. There is an amazing bar, mind-blowing bar in Morningside. And what Whiskey Brothers have done is they have gone to the factory where they have thousands upon thousands of barrels of Bains whiskey that's been aging for 10 years. And what the owners or the managers of the factory do is they allow the tasters from Whiskey Brothers to go to every single barrel, pull out a small amount, taste each one, and pick out the barrel that they think is the best. And they've bottled that barrel. So if you have a look here, age statement. So like this one over here on the front, it says 10. So every drop of alcohol in here or here is a minimum of 10 years old. It can be older, but it cannot be younger than 10.
Okay.
And that's what gives it the age statement. And then you can also see on the bottle, it denotes single barrel. Now, if you ever get an opportunity to buy a whiskey that's a single barrel, or taste a whiskey that's a single barrel, you just know that there is an expert, somebody that's dedicated a portion of their lives to understanding that spirit, that's gone out, they've picked that one, they've selected it as the best, and that will be something special. So I personally haven't tasted this before. I've just opened it now, obviously for the show, and I'm super excited about this. Brace yourself, it is a little bit expensive. It's around 800 Rand a bottle. They're available in very limited quantities, and this will obviously only be available from Whiskey Brothers. So let's take a shot at this, Ben.
Fantastic.
Let's see how this goes.
Okay, similar to the first Bains in terms of smell.
It's less harsh, so on the nose, right off the bat, I can tell that it's a slightly older whiskey. So even on the nose, it has less alcohol coming through. You can pick out the complexity of the flavors a little bit more and not have to deal with the punch of alcohol. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's really good.
That's a lovely one there.
That is amazing. This has a really rich, deep flavor profile. On the back of the note, you get a lot of fruity flavors, like rich, deep fruity flavors, like dried apricots are picking up a little bit. On the nose, I get just a tiny bit of like prune. You definitely can pick up the brandy, like the origin.
Absolutely, yeah, the brandy still comes through there.
There's a grapiness
to it. The same way, yeah.
There's definitely a grapiness to this. That is absolutely fantastic.
Beautiful. That's a treat.
And let me tell you that whoever picked this one out, you guys are doing a fantastic job. Please keep it up. Cheers, eh?
Pats on the back there.
Yeah, I mean this is the least of it. So this is just the starting point. I would like everybody to go out there the next time you're looking at buying a bottle of whiskey, head into your store, go to the South African section. I promise you, your mind will be blown at the variety that is now produced, that is world class. Like other countries are clamoring, their whiskey markets are clamoring to now get South African whiskey. South Africans don't even know about it. It's on our shelves. You can go to like certain shops. I've been in there where there's 10, 15 bottles of South African whiskey, order them 10 years old or older, different casks, different mash bills, different producers. There's now micro producers coming onto the market. But for me, this is proudly South African. This is the best of our industry. We employ a ton of people through these markets, and I'm super proud because I believe that we're not as big, that we can go toe to toe with the best of the world to at least some degree.
Okay, well that's fantastic. I mean, yeah, a bottle you're consuming, with whoever you're consuming, it's got to be responsible. Be careful if you're having more than one or two. Make sure that you've got a safe means to get home, and just enjoy responsibly.
100% agree with you, Ben. The only way we can go on enjoying these amazing pours is to be responsible.
Absolutely. Cool. I think that concludes episode 1. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back very soon with some more delights and treats to share with you and with the world.
We'll be back. Thanks for joining us.